Okay, so today is the third session of the second semester on the class on braided fusion category, more specifically covering the paper by Drinfeld, Gelaki, Nietzsche, Shostrik on braided fusion category 1. So we already started to cover this paper in the first semester, and we are still in the part of reviewing what we did last semester. So I guess today and tomorrow, we'll continue the reviewing, and hopefully tomorrow we will finish. So next week we will start new material, starting with equivalentization and disequivalentization section 4 of the paper. But we are still in this reviewing part. So what did we last week we finished with this result. We omitted the proof, but this result, let me remember a bit what was saying. So you are in a premodular category, and we can pictorially you can write the value of the twist this way, more precisely this way. But this is exactly what this proposition is proving. So the twist is exactly the ratio of a twisted closed loop by an untwisted closed loop. So it's really the multiplicative contribution of twisting something. So it's really a twist. So the name is good. So of course this picture is not mathematically rigorous. If you want to make something mathematically rigorous, remember you need a natural isomorphism, phi, etc. So this is what we said last time. So the proof of that is interesting. So I will omit the proof, but we have to show that this is commuting. So we have to prove this commuting, this is commuting, this is commuting, and then this equal this provides the key ingredient to get what we need. And to prove this commuting, this commuting, this commuting, you just need to use the basic axiom. So here, so naturality or some hexagon axiom, and this one is trivial, etc. And then you get what you need. And this, I guess, this part, let me recall, this is very important, the naturality. You can pass a morphism through the braiding. This is the naturality of braiding. So this is important to, I guess this should be out of the proof. This is important to recall the naturality. Hexagon axiom. So hexagon axiom, you can move the string. Anyway. So, okay. Now, so new subsection, the Verline formula. So you take a premodular category, you take the S matrix as it was definition recalled last week. So this S matrix is symmetric. So as a matrix, it's self-transpose. So it's equal to its transpose. Okay, and it's satisfied also if you consider the dual of the object. So the entry with the dual object is exactly the entry without dual. And this can be proved pictorially this way. So I will not read the proof. So now remember the equation. Remember, you have a default of pivotality, which is the default of a monoidal structure of the twist, because you have this component which appear. So this was equation 15. Now apply the trace here and here. So you get trace of that equal trace of that. Okay. So what? Okay, so in fact, remember this, if x and y are simple, play only the role of scalar, so you can put it out of the trace, in fact. And so you are just this, which is the definition of the entry of the S matrix. So what do we get? So you put this out, you get that, so you get that. And here, yeah, so you develop, in fact, you have this is linear in that. So you have the fusion rule. So you develop the fusion rule. Okay, with the multiplicity. So you really have this equality. And if you reformulate the equation, you put this the other side, you get a formula for the entry of the S matrix in function of the twist and the fusion data and the dimension also, which is where is the dimension? There. Because this is a constant times the identity. So when you compute the trace, you get the dimension. Here you have the identity, but it's vanished by it's composed with something, so you don't need to care. But here you have identity, so you need dimension. Okay. Okay. So you have this formula for the entry of the S matrix. On the other hand, the S matrix satisfies this identity also. So I guess it's not, you do not deduce from that, but here you refer to that. So what did I write here? So here it's not, it's only premodular, it's not just modular. Okay. So let me see. You have the fusion rule. So what did I write? Mapping a simple object to that is a linear character, is a ring homomorphism. But every linear character is of this form if and only the S matrix is invertible. Yeah. In this case, the S matrix is nothing but the character table of a group up to permutation and renormalization. Okay. Okay. So what I say by this comment here is that this look like when you consider the character table of a group, the column can satisfy this kind of thing also, because each column is a linear character. But here it's also okay. But the point is that you get all the linear character this way only if and only if the S matrix is non-degenerate. Otherwise, what you get this way is only a subset, a strict subset of all the possible linear character. So in particular, you can have some redundancy, making the S matrix not invertible. Okay, wait. Let me note something. Okay. Okay. So next, when the S matrix is invertible, okay, this is equivalent to the Verline formula. So when the S matrix is invertible, this is exactly the Verline formula. What make me a little doubting? I am surprised that this formula hold in the premodular case. Wait. No, the Verline formula, okay. The Verline formula is a way to recover the fusion data from the entry of the S matrix. Here, it's just the, okay. So if this should be true, there is no let me, I guess there is no, we don't, it's true for premodular. I will just double check the paper. Let's see the premodular. Okay, so that's okay. So a priori, according to this reference, this formula is true for all premodular categories. We don't need non-degeneracy. But this is equivalent to Verline in the non-degenerate case as written here. Okay. So maybe my confusion was what I wrote here. By this, it follows from the Verline-like formula for all commutative. Yeah, okay. So what I wrote here is that, in fact, when you consider this comment, there is a Verline formula for all commutative fusion ring. We don't need to be the Grothendieck ring of a premodular category, in fact. All commutative fusion ring has a Verline formula. This way. Yeah. But it is, the Verline formula is for the character table of the fusion ring. So this, so be careful, the S matrix in the premodular case, in the modular case, you can recover the S matrix from the character table of the Grothendieck ring, but it's not true in the premodular case, which is strictly premodular. The character table is in some sense always invertible, but the S matrix is not always invertible. They match together in the modular case. But the Verline-like formula always hold for any commutative fusion on the character table. So that's why. Anyway. Okay. So here is the Verline formula. So to recover the fusion data from the entry of the S matrix in the modular case. But as I said, this again, this formula is a little bit cheating, confusing, because in fact, you have modularity here. Of course, is required because you consider S matrix entry, but this is true for all commutative fusion ring. You have a Verline formula. You can recover the entry, the fusion data from the entry of the character table. So it's a bit confusing to say that this formula hold only for modular category, this hold for any commutative fusion ring. Okay, so center of a fusion category. Let me see if I can go quicker. For any fusion category, its Dirichlet center is defined as a category of category whose objects are pairs. Okay, where X is an object here, and this C is a natural isomorphism encoding the the fact that X commute with all object V. So in particular, not all objects of C appear in such pair because when the Grothendieck ring is non-commutative, there exist objects where it do not commute for all. So the object here may not be all the objects of C. And in fact, the simple object here, this may not be simple because in fact, maybe the simple object do not commute, but if you make a direct sum of some simple object, you can get something commuting. In particular. So the fact that it commutes, of course, is not enough. You need the natural isomorphism, but okay. This family of isomorphism must satisfy a specific compatibility condition. Okay. To get the Drinfeld center. So these compatibility conditions are similar to half of the hexagon axiom. So it's half of the hexagon axiom for a braided category. That's why this is called the half braiding in the literature. So this family, so the tensor category Drinfeld center of C is naturally equipped with a braiding. Going to derive from that, it is shown that this is itself a fusion category, if C is fusion, and its dimension is the square of the dimension of the fusion category C, and also for the Frobenius-Perron dimension. So this makes sense if the category is not pseudo-unitary. Otherwise, it's the same. There exists a canonical forgetful functor. Okay, so you just forget about that and you only keep that. Okay, so what about so this forgetful functor is surjective in the weak sense defined before. So for every object, you take every simple object. Every simple object is a component of that for some object here. Okay. As I said, in particular, the simple object here may not be if you apply the forgetful functor of a simple object, then this may not be simple, but it has, of course, simple component, and in fact, all the simple here appear as a component here by this result. It's weakly surjective in this weak sense. It is known that if C is spherical, fusion category, then the center admits a unique spherical structure such that the forgetful functor preserves the spherical structure. Okay. Thus, this makes premodular category, and in fact, modular category. So that's a fundamental, in fact, that's one of the most fundamental results in fusion category theory. The Drinfeld center of a spherical fusion category is a modular fusion category. And that's one of the key results in fusion category theory because, as I already recall last semester, there are many results. Many results for general fusion category are reduced to modular fusion category by going to the center. So it's the notion of modular fusion category is really, really, really constraining, very, very constraining. But for any fusion category, the center is modular. So you can prove a lot of things with this trick. It's really one of the deepest results in fusion category theory. So this is proved in previous reference under the assumption this is non-zero, which automatically. Okay. Yeah. Remark. So if, oh, again, this thing, I don't like that. So I will omit to write 5 because I feel like it is technical, but maybe require some level, but for this reviewing, I omit to read that. So if C is pseudo-unitary, in the sense we called before, then so is the Trinfeld center. Okay. And this follow directly from the dimension identities mentioned before. Moreover, if C is positive spherical structure, then the corresponding spherical structure on C is also positive. This is because the forceful functor preserves the spherical structure, and then we have that. Okay. We get positivity. Second point. If C is integral, so all the simple objects are integral for unit per dimension, then the Trinfeld center is also integral. It follows from the fact that the function from unit per dimension is equal, for the Trinfeld center, is equal to the composition of the forgetful functor and the forgetful per dimension. Okay. And they are both monoidal. So the composition is monoidal, and it should be okay. The converse hold, if the Trinfeld center is integral, then the category itself is integral. Okay. So you have the equivalence. The fusion category is integral if only if its Trinfeld center is integral. This is also true if you replace integral by weakly integral. Remember that weakly integral is just the Frobenius parent dimension of the global Frobenius parent dimension is an integer instead of for all the simple objects. So it's also true for weakly integral. And the converse is the following proposition, okay, for weakly integral. So one way for weakly integral is immediate, and the other way is given by this proposition. So let's see the fusion category such that the Trinfeld center is weakly integral, then the category is also weakly integral. Okay. And okay, so the proof is there. I omit the proof. Okay, center of a braided fusion category. Let's see the braided fusion category with braiding C. You define C up to be the same category equipped with the inverse braiding. So in EGNO book, it's called C rev. So you have the braiding, usual braiding, and the reverse braiding. You see, this is bottom, this is top. Okay, and it's just the inverse of this braiding like that. Okay. So using these two braiding, you can consider two embedding of the braided fusion category C into its Trinfeld center. One embedding this way, the other embedding this way. And okay. But okay. So this here, be careful, the braiding are not the same. The category, you embed the fusion category in two different ways, but here the braiding are not the same because you have this braiding and this braiding. But at the level of fusion category, this is the same. So you have these two embedding. So this both functors are fully faithful, etc. Together, they induce a single braided tensor functor. So you consider these two functors, you can group them together into a single tensor functor. And we already stated a more general result, allowing us to do that with some fully faithful functor. So you have a braided tensor functor from the Deligne tensor product of C with C up to the Trinfeld center. And oh, so no, this is later. In fact, maybe we mentioned that in the introduction. I forgot. Like we already mentioned something like that. Anyway, this will be proved later, mentioned later. Okay, but anyway, in this later proposition, we will in fact prove that this functor, this braided tensor functor, is an equivalence. In other words, this defines the notion of factorizable if and only if the category is non-degenerate. So it's an alternating way to define non-degeneracy. The first way was the fact that the est matrix is invertible. Here you have this functor is an equivalence, so factorizable. Another way, and as I already mentioned, there will be a third way using the notion of Muger centralizer. The Muger centralizer is trivial. Okay. Pointed braided category and metric group. Okay. So the notion of pointed braided category, in fact, is a proper extension of the notion of a group theoretical notion called metric group. So you take two abelian group with a multiplicative notion for a group operation, okay. The quadratic form on the group with value B is a map satisfying this condition. Okay, so this is, so Q of G inverse is Q of G. The function BGH Q of GH divided by QGQH, which is symmetric, okay. So by definition, we need this to be B multiplicative. So B multiplicative means that you can develop multiplicative at B on the left, and in fact, the right also is true by symmetry. So this defines a quadratic form, and we refer to B such as a B multiplicative form. So this B, so this Q satisfying that is a quadratic form, but this specific B from a quadratic form is called a B multiplicative form associated to Q. If you take B to be the non-zero element of the field, the group of non-zero elements of the field, then in this case, this B is also called B character associated to Q. The quadratic form Q is called non-degenerate if its associated formula, no, if its associated, sorry, if its associated form B is non-degenerate, meaning that this matrix with this entry is invertible. Okay, it's straightforward to show that for any element of the group and any integer n, qg power n is equal to qg power n. And the proof is straightforward. It's a combinatorial exercise here. Hence, this notion of quadratic form aligns with Bourbaki's definition of the module. Okay. Don't care. Not every quadratic form can be expressed in this form. In the form qg equal bgg. Okay. Where b is b multiplicative. So, yeah, because of that, where is it? Because of that, we see that bgg is bgg divided by, wait, bgg, so bgg, what is b? Yeah, bqgg, so qg squared divided by qg, so it's 1. Not every quadratic form can be expressed in the form. Okay, so but this beta is do not play the same role as this B. What we are saying here is that we cannot make you cannot classify all the possible quadratic form as this form where B is a B multiplicative. Okay. For example, yeah, so this is a kind of basic counterexample. There exists a quadratic form here which cannot be derived from a B multiplicative. This one. Yeah, this Q is a quadratic form which cannot be written on this form. Okay. So now you take a quadratic form and you take the kernel of the associated B multiplicative form. So, so in the paper they did not define what they mean by the kernel of the associated B multiplicative form. So here the kernel is that all the elements of the group such that this is equal to 1 for all H. And this is a group because we check that this is really a group. So this is confusing because in the paper they did not write what they mean by kernel, but kernel of the associated B multiplicative form. It's a B multiplicative form, so you have 2 and 3, but in fact the definition I found only involved 1 and 3. So it's a little confusing to call that the kernel of the B multiplicative form, but anyway, it's really a group. The restriction of Q to this subgroup define a group morphism. Okay. Whose square is always 1. Okay, so it's proved here. Moreover, so here I'm just adding details. Usually when it is in color, there are just details which are not written in the paper. Okay, next, moreover, Q is the pullback or lift of a quadratic form where H0 is a kernel of chi. So chi is that. So you have Q. So you can restrict to that up to some lift. Okay. And it is proved here. Okay. And that's all. So this is saying that you can always restrict to a quadratic form within some sense with a trivial kernel or something like that, up to some lifting. Anyway, the category of premetric group. Now fix an algebraically closed field of characteristic 0 and take G star to be the dual of G, the group morphism from G to the non-zero scalar. If G is abelian, these two groups are isomorphic, non-canonically isomorphic, but isomorphic. If otherwise, they are not isomorphic because this is commutative. This is abelian because the abelianity of that comes from the abelianity of that. But this may not be abelian in general, the G itself. But if it is abelian, as I said, both are the same up to a non-canonical isomorphism. So a premetric group is a pair where G is a finite abelian group and Q is a quadratic form. The morphism of premetric group is a group morphism compatible with the quadratic form. Okay. Premetric group and their morphism form a category denoted premetric group on the field K. Okay, premetric. Now, what about metric group? Let G be a finite abelian group. A quadratic form is said to be non-degenerate, as mentioned before, if its associated B character is non-degenerate, meaning that the induced group morphism is an isomorphism. Okay. Okay. So if the group is odd, then every quadratic form arises from a non-degenerate quadratic form. Okay, so in the odd case, every quadratic form is a lift of something which is non-degenerate. Okay. This does not hold, for instance, in this case. So the counterexample we saw before. Or maybe not. But at least in this, the cyclic group of order 2, and this, I guess it's different from the example. It may be different from that. It's not the same thing. This is I power n square. And this is another example for the groups, cyclic group of order 2. So this quadratic form do not be derived, is not the lift of a non-degenerate one. As explained here, a metric group is a premetric group such that Q is non-degenerate. Okay. So premetric group is like premodular, and metric group is like modular. In fact, it's not just like, in fact, it's a theorem that in the pointed case, these two notions are the same in some sense. Up to twisting by maybe by 3 cocycle or something. So the category premetric group, let's denote by that the one category truncation of the two category of pointed braided fusion category, PBK. So we will call PM here for premetric. Okay. And here it's PB for pointed braided. Okay. The one category truncation of the two category of pointed braided fusion category, one category truncation. Okay. This is a category whose objects are pointed braided fusion category and whose morphism are braided functor considered up to braided natural isomorphism. Let C be a pointed braided fusion category. The isomorphism class of simple object of C form a finite abelian group. And you define from the braiding of C a quadratic form. Legs are simple, okay. It's easy to show that it's really a quadratic form. And this gives G a structure of premetric group. So from a pointed braided fusion category, you get a premetric group. Tac, tac. And the next proposition is saying that this functor is an equivalence. In fact, the category of premetric group is equivalent to the category of pointed braided fusion category. So it's really equivalent. In fact, there is no need to care about twisting by a tricocycle or something. Everything is encoded in the quadratic form. Good. So this result is due to Joyal-Street using some homological techniques involving Hellinger-MacLane space. So this is saying that the proof here is really complicated. But a more elementary but more computational proof is provided by Keene. And the proof of the essential surjectivity of F is included in the appendix D of the paper. We may not cover if we have not enough time. The premodular category C, G, Q. So you consider a premetric group. So now we take a premetric group and we want to make premodular category. So by some previous proposition, it corresponds to a braided fusion category, which we denote by proposition 2 for 1. So it's not 2 for 1, it's 2 for 1. It corresponds to a braided fusion category, which we denote carry. So we did not say nothing new here. We just use that equivalence, and you say that from that, for any object here, there is something here. Unique up to equivalence, so you denote it this way. This category is determined up to braided equivalence, and such an equivalence is unique up to unique isomorphism. Example 226, I forgot. Provide a spherical structure. So example 226, let me see what is it. 226. Yeah. Remember, you use that in the point case. So every simple object is invertible, and so you can invert the coevaluation map, and you can make the fake zigzag relation to make a natural isomorphism. So this example provides a spherical structure here, giving it the structure of a premodular category. We use the same notation here. For this premodular category, the corresponding twist is given by equation 18. So this I recall at the beginning of this class. And okay, in fact, the twist is just the value of the quadratic form on the simple object represented by G. Okay. In fact, satisfy. So this satisfies this default of monoidality here. Imply that the following. So if you have two simple objects with isomorphism class like that, then this so you have that. I guess, yeah, you get where B is a B character associated to Q. So in fact, the B character associated to Q is completely given by the double braiding. Okay. Consequently, the S matrix of that is given. Yeah, so entry of the S matrix are exactly given by the B character. Okay, therefore the premodular category is modular if and only if the premetric group is a metric group, as I recall before. Okay, so premodular. In the pointed case, premodular is the same thing as premetric group, and modular is the same thing as metric group. Okay. Okay, so let's make the pause now because it's before starting the new subsection. Pause. 5 minutes pause. Okay. So, the premetric group, the premodular category CGQ chi. Let me see something. Okay. So the premodular category CGQ chi. So what is that? So we have CGQ. What about chi? So it's a kind of twist maybe. So in the context of the previous section, chi. Let chi be a character such that you have that. This character defines a tensor automorphism of the identity functor on the category each simple object X, the automorphism acts as a multiplicative, as a multiplication by that, where this is an isomorphism class, okay. We define a new premodular category as follow. As a braided fusion category, it coincides with that as a braided fusion category. So they coincide as a braided, but its spherical structure differ by the twist. In this way, this is a bijection between isomorphism class of triple and pointed premodular category up to okay. No, the problem is that I see premodular is braided plus a spherical structure. Okay. So if you are only interested in braided, you don't need to care about that. So it's really completely characterized this way. But if you are interested in premodular, so if you need to care about the spherical structure, and so you need to consider this guy, which I guess maybe the one mentioned somewhere before. Where is it? Is it this one? Not sure. Maybe. Yeah, look like. Anyway. Okay. So in this premodular category, the simple object corresponding to the element of the group has dimension plus or minus 1. The twist is given by that. Okay, so you have your new twist. And the S matrix is, you have this variation in the S matrix, okay. Okay, so now we change completely, but not completely, but we forget about, for a moment, the pointed case, and we consider every symmetric fusion category. So the symmetric class of braided fusion category, when so a braided fusion category is called symmetric when it is equal to its Reinfeld or its Muger centralizer. But we did not define it yet. So this is equivalent to say that if the composition of the braiding satisfy that. Okay. Yeah. So double braiding is the identity. So let me write something. Okay. So as a classical example in the category red, so this is of course the classical example. Red G, finite-dimensional representation of a finite group equipped with a standard symmetric braiding. So in fact, yeah, it's trivial. You just switch X tensor Y as Y tensor X. Okay. And you take this as the braiding. Deligne proves that any symmetric fusion category is equivalent to a super generalization of that. So as a fusion category, it is exactly that, but the braiding may have some superstructure. So it's not that, but that up to some superstructure. More precisely, let G be a finite group and let Z be an element of the center of the group, which is of order 2. Then you can modify the braiding here this way, where M and N come from this choice. So this is so this M and N come as the eigenvalue of X with the left multiplication by Z, etc. The resulting braiding fusion category is denoted like that. And equivalently, this can be viewed as a full subcategory of superrepresentation of G in which Z acts by the parity operator. So this is a subcategory of the entire category of superrepresentation. But what Deligne proved is that every symmetric fusion category is of this form. Okay. Example. Do you take the easiest non-trivial example, the cyclic group of order 2, and you take the non-trivial Z to be just a non-trivial element, and even with this almost trivial ingredient, you can make something new. So this is using what we explained here. What you make here is the category of supervector space, SVEC. And yeah, so you have to really be careful with this SVEC because you can make mistake. There are many mistakes can be made if you forget about this SVEC. So you should not forget about that. So there is two possible braiding on this category, the trivial one and SVEC. Okay. So Deligne for recall that for a symmetric fusion category C, a super fiber functor is a braid functor from C to SVEC. So you replace fiber functor by super fiber functor and VEC by SVEC. Given such a functor, define GF to be the group of tensor automorphism. Okay. So it's a usual construction from this was also used for the reconstruction theorem for off algebra. If you have a fiber functor, you consider some I guess and of f. And you make on that the structure of algebra. But here you just here it's easier. It is not, yeah, it's easier in some sense, but it's also superstructure. But anyway, you consider the group of tensor automorphism of F, and this group will precisely be the model that will precisely be the group inside, providing the model for this. Okay, so let you take an element in this group given the parity automorphism. Okay, so what is the definition of that? For each element here, the automorphism correspond to the parity automorphism. The automorphism of that. Wait. Okay. Because this is an element here, so this is a tensor automorphism. So this is central. Okay. Parity. Yeah. So this F is a specific group tensor automorphism corresponding to this superstructure here, the parity automorphism. So it is central, it's of order 2. There exists a natural lift of F. Okay. Okay, so from that, we can lift that and make that. And this lift, I guess, is an equivalence. So Deligne said that if C is a symmetric fusion category, then there exists a super fiber functor. All such fiber functor are isomorphic. And for any such super fiber functor, the lift is an equivalence. So this is a very famous theorem of Deligne, which saying that symmetric fusion category are equivalent to that, something of this form. G, so super, so what we called before here, this with that. So every symmetric fusion category is of this form by Deligne. Okay. So this theorem implies that the isomorphism class of this pair is uniquely determined by the symmetric fusion category. Not true without specifying the braiding structure, since there exists a non-isomorphic group with isomorphic representation category. Okay. So this braided fusion category completely remembers the group. But if you forget about the braiding, it's not true. Okay. So this means that this theorem of Deligne is deep. In fact, we have really something to prove non-trivial. So let's see the appointed braided fusion category associated with a parametric group. Then this category is symmetric if only if the bicharacter is associated to Q is trivial. Okay, in that case, this quadratic form is a character with square equal 1, and the category C is of this form, where G is a dual of A, so it's isomorphic to A, because A is abelian, and Z is given by the quadratic form Q. Okay. So from the Deligne theorem and some example involving finite dimensional of algebra, in the group case, we obtain that every symmetric fusion category is integral. Okay. Moreover, any symmetric fusion category admits a spherical structure in which the twist is the identity. Okay. However, this spherical structure is not necessarily positive. For instance, in this category, the categorical dimension of an object coincides with the superdimension of the corresponding supervector space, that is, the trace of Z acting on X, which may be negative. Okay, so be careful. You may have some plus or minus to deal with when you consider supervector space. But if you don't want to consider the minus part, you define the notion of Tanakian category, which is a symmetric fusion category, satisfying one of these equivalent conditions. So the spherical structure is positive. There is a fiber functor, not a super fiber functor, and the essential image of any super fiber functor So any super fiber functor is essentially a fiber functor. And there exists a finite group such that C is equivalent to rep G as a braided fusion category. So, in some sense, the conceptual part of Deligne theorem is saying that any Tanakian category is of this form. And then you can make a little variation by considering symmetric by adding some z, but essentially what is important is that for Tanakian, it's exactly so. This really recover the notion of representation category of a finite group is completely characterized categorically. It's a symmetric fusion category with a fiber functor, which is, yeah. So you have a purely categorical reformulation of the notion of representation category of a group. And then of a group because the braiding structure recovers the group also. So it's nice. Okay. A pointed braided category corresponding to a parametric group is Tanakian if and only if the quadratic form is trivial. Okay, so if you take two symmetric categories and a surjective braided functor between the two, then one is Tanakian if and only if the other is Tanakian. The proof is there. Now you take a general symmetric fusion category by the corollary stating that symmetric imply integral, and Deligne theorem, I guess, in some remark. So unique positive spherical for integral. So a general symmetric fusion category, C admit a unique positive spherical structure. The associated twist is a tensor automorphism of the identity functor. Okay, and by some previous proposition, determine a mu2 grading of C. Okay. Okay. So be careful. Tanakian mean spherical structure with trivial twist is positive. Spherical structure with trivial twist is positive. Yeah. So category is Tanakian if the spherical structure with trivial twist is positive, but in general, there is always a positive spherical structure with a twist which may not be trivial. Oh, see, so you have to be careful. Little subtlety you can always have a positive spherical structure, but the twist may not be trivial. So spherical structure with trivial twist is positive. Okay. This is definition of Tanakian. Reformulation of Tanakian. So now, consider the neutral component of this grading here, which is the full subcategory consisting of objects where the twist is trivial. This is the maximal Tanakian subcategory of C. Okay. Okay, corollary 250. If the Frobenius paradigm is odd, then this central component is the entire category, which means that a symmetric fusion category of odd Frobenius paradigm is always Tanakian. More generally, we have two possibilities. So the entire category is Tanakian, or the neutral component is just half of the entire category. Okay, and the proof is there. Okay, the regular algebra of a Tanakian category. Okay, so let big E be a Tanakian category according to this previous proposition. A choice of a fiber functor. So, okay. Determine a group of tensor automorphism of the form. And a braided equivalence. Okay. So this is the line category, the line theorem for Tanaka. Let fun GF denotes the algebra of function from GF to K. This group acts here by left multiplication, making it a commutative algebra object here. Okay, so you can see the algebra of function from G to K as an algebra object in this category. Consequently, so you consider this algebra object here, and you come back to here, you get, because this is an equivalence, you get the algebra object here, denoted like that. A commutative algebra object in E. Okay. This algebra object is called the regular algebra. In practice, we often denote it we omit the F and refer it as the regular algebra. This slight abuse of notation is justified since the isomorphism class of that is independent of the specific choice of that. All fiber functors are isomorphic. Okay. There exists a natural isomorphism. So remark, there exists a natural isomorphism between. So for any object in E, there is a natural isomorphism between the space of morphism between V and the regular algebra object and the space of morphism in VEC between them. FV, so F is a fiber, so I forgot F. Where is F? Here, F, the fiber functor. So it's a kind of forgetful functor. N1. Okay. 1 is the unit of the trivial category VEC. In other words, by Yoneda lemma, I will not recall here. This regular algebra object is I of 1, where 1 is a right adjoint of the forgetful functor F, or the fiber functor F. Okay. Yeah, you have a notion of right adjoint. You put this here, and the algebra structure on the regular algebra can be described as follows. Since the fiber functor is a tensor functor, for any two objects, we have a natural map from that tensor that to that. Okay, so just this picture, nothing new. Okay, which correspond to a map from that tensor that to that. Okay, so you use this isomorphism and you can replace these pictures into a map, an algebra structure on so a map like that, okay? So it's not finished. By a VEC enriched Yoneda lemma, this gives rise to an multiplication morphism from that to that. So you have this tensor give to this tensor because this is for all V, and so by kind of Yoneda lemma, this is equivalent to something like that. Which defines the multiplication morphism of the algebra structure. Okay. It is used if this is categorical. Okay. So of course, you say, okay, you define this as coming from the function from gf to k. So there is no, what is the point of redefining that? But in fact, if you define it categorically, like 28 here, you can define it categorically like that, and then you can recover the multiplication structure this way. In any monomial category, an algebra A together with A tensor A naturally acquire a structure of A bimodule. Moreover, the multiplication morphism is a morphism of A bimodule. Okay. Exercise. We now state an important property for the regular algebra. So let A be the regular algebra of an Iterrakian category E, that the multiplication morphism admit a unique splitting in the category of A bimodule. In particular, the bimodule A is a direct summand of A tensor A. So in here I explain what I mean by splitting. So let me, so it's not a proof, so I guess it's good to read. The splitting of a morphism F from M to N in a category is a morphism from S from N to M, so something come back, such that the composition, you do that first, and then that is identity. So it's a splitting. Here, F is the multiplication morphism. And so the existence of a splitting means the existence of a morphism from A to A tensor A such that the composition is the identity. And both S and mu are morphism in the bimodule category, which means that commute with both the left and right A action. By definition, F is a split monomorphism. So you can, if this is a multiplication, you can visualize S as this way, and the composition is identity, so you have that. By splitting lemma, famous theorem in category theory, abelian category theory. Because S is a split monomorphism, M decompose as N and the kernel of F. In other words, in our case, A tensor A is isomorphic to A, so A is a component of A tensor. And the other component is the kernel of the multiplication morphism. So it's really a direct summand. Okay, so this picture corresponds to the definition of a separable algebra. Okay. So now, the new section, centralizers in and non-degeneracy of braided fusion category. So now we will review the section about Muger centralizer. So we finished the preliminary part. Okay. So centralizer in and non-degeneracy of braided fusion category. Remember, we said that we can reformulate non-degeneracy using the Muger centralizer. So it may be one of the goals of the section. The subject of this section, the primary aim of this section, is to generalize the centralizer result established by Muger, H. Muller-Bruguière, to the broader context of an arbitrary braided fusion category, that is, without assuming non-degeneracy or premodularity. Additionally, it presents several new results, including the theorem 3.14, stating that a braided fusion category and a fusion subcategory, then you have this equality on the Frobenius parent dimension. So this is interesting because it's for Frobenius parent dimension. I guess it is new because it was known only for dimension. So it's new for Frobenius parent dimension. So including this new result and the development of projective centralizer theory. Again, we skip the heuristic involving Lie coalgebra. Okay. The notion of centralizer due to Muger introduced the following definition. So Muger introduced the following definition. So you take two objects in a braided fusion category. We say that these two objects centralize each other if the double braiding is the identity for this specifically for these two objects. The centralizer denoted D prime of a fusion subcategory, D of the braided fusion category C, is defined as the full subcategory of C consisting of all the objects that centralize every object of D. And here you have an analogy. Maybe I write this later. With the notion of commutant in von Neumann algebra. In the same notation, and in fact, you have some similar property. But so it's not equivalent a priori, but you have some similarity. And similar proof also. So you take a fusion subcategory D, and you consider all the objects of C centralizing with all these objects of D, and this will be called the centralizer of D. It is easy to verify that this is itself a fusion subcategory. Moreover, this, by definition, in fact, this is symmetric if and only if a fusion subcategory is symmetric if and only if it is included in its Muger centralizer. Okay. What about this color part? So I guess here we are just verifying. So I will omit that. We are just verifying that this is a fusion subcategory. So the fact that this Muger centralizer is a fusion subcategory is explained in this part. Recall that the S-tilde matrix of a braided fusion category is defined this way, making it independent of the choice of the natural isomorphism phi, because the dependency vanish. Okay, so independent. These depend on the choice of the natural isomorphism, but this one do not, as we already mentioned. A braided fusion category is called non-degenerate if only if the S-tilde matrix is invertible. For every object, for every simple object, the square norm is also independent. We already mentioned that. Also recall that the global dimension is non-zero. Okay. A useful characterization of the centralizer of a fusion subcategory in a premodular fusion category using the S matrix was provided by H. Müller-Brugger. And the appendix C of the paper prove a generalization of the result for arbitrary braided, not necessarily spherical fusion category. Specifically, it shows, so in this annex, that for every object, for every simple object here, a simple object here is simple in the Muger centralizer of D, if and only if this entry of the S-tilde matrix is equal to 1 for all simple in D. And it is not here, it is not a simple object. So of course, you can reformulate this like that. There exists a y such that it is different from 1, but there is another reformulation saying that it is not a simple object in the Muger centralizer of D, if and only if the sum of the square norm of the object of D times this entry of the S-tilde matrix is equal to 0. If and only if you just permute these two is equal to 0. Okay. Anyway. Here I ask, what is the difference between the two? Is it because the S-tilde matrix may not be symmetric, or is just No, I did not check that, but anyway. Example 3.3. Let GQ be a parametric group and let H be a subgroup. If C is a pointed Brady diffusion category corresponding to that and K correspond to the subgroup, then the Mueger centralizer of K correspond to the orthogonal of H with respect to the bilinear form B induced by the quadratic form Q. This follows directly from this formula for the B. We now outline the main properties of centralizer in the pointed case, coming from this theorem, and this theorem, which we will state soon. Reduced to well-known properties of orthogonal complement. In general, given a fusion subcategory D in a Brady diffusion category C, we define an equivalence relation on the set of simple objects of two isomorphism as follows. So for two objects are defined to be equivalent if there exists an object in the Mueger centralizer such that Y is a subobject of the tensor W. Okay, so it's a way to make an equivalence relation depending on D. So it is straightforward to verify that this defines an equivalence relation. Okay, the full abelian subcategory of C generated by an equivalence class under this relation, it's called a D prime component of B. This terminology is justified by the fact that Y and Z are equivalent if only they lie in the same decomposable component of D prime module category C. Okay. So the Brady diffusion category C as a category of D prime module and the decomposable component correspond to the equivalence to this equivalence relation. Okay. The following result generalize the result of Brugger and Mueger. If you take a fusion subcategory of a Brady diffusion category, consider the submatrix S defined by so you only consider the M3. So here is only simple of D, and this is everything. So it's a kind of piece of rectangular part of the S-tilde matrix. Then, so what? Okay, so for D. Of course, if you take D equals C, you recover everything. The following is proved later. So let's see be a Brady diffusion category and D a fusion subcategory. The rank of this rectangle equal to the number of D prime component of C. In particular, the category C is non-degenerate if and only if the Mueger centralizer is trivial. Okay. So why? Because if you take W equal 1, the rank is everything. Take W equal 1, rank equal everything. W equal 1. What is W? Okay. Because for W equal 1, so here we need the existence of an object, but you can always take W equal 1 for this equivalence relation. And so, okay, something like that. So let C be a Brady diffusion category. The fusion subcategory D is non-degenerate if and only if. So this is the same result, but for a fusion subcategory. So the intersection of this Neufeld centralizer is trivial. So let D be a fusion subcategory of a non-degenerate fusion subcategory, non-degenerate braided fusion category C. Then the number of D prime component of C is equal to the number of simple objects in D. So let D be a fusion subcategory of a non-degenerate braided fusion category C, then the number of D prime component. So what is the difference with that and that? The rank. Yeah. No, in here, the in particular is because I guess you take C equal D. You can D equal C or D equal VEC. I forgot one of the two. And it should be D equal. Yeah. So. Wait. Yeah, W is in D prime. So here, this, so I should say, I should add that, take D equals, okay, D equals C. So D prime is VEC, and so in VEC you have only one, which is that. Okay, that's why you. And this is different because you here you don't take D equals C. So let D be a fusion subcategory of a non-degenerate braided fusion category C. Then the number of D prime component is equal to the number of simple objects in D. Okay. And I will stop here because it's time. See you tomorrow. So we are really doing something like 20 pages per class. So if we continue this way, let me see what remains. Yeah, we may need 4 more sessions.
Yeah, 4.
So tomorrow will be 1. Next week, so 4 more. Wait, tomorrow is 1. So tomorrow we reach 20. Yeah, 2 more sessions.
Yeah.
2 more classes. Tomorrow we should be able to reach 80. And next week's first class we should finish. So in total, 5 sessions to review everything. So I promised 4, but 5 is okay.
60.
Remember, we have 24 sessions, so 5 sessions is really not so much. Here, okay. See you tomorrow.